I will mark Mr. Kenyon is excused. Mr. Lott.
Here.
Ms. Let's see here, Mr. Schaefer, Dr. Schaefer. Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Thayer.
Present.
And Ms. Tomasi.
I'm here, Amy. Thank you.
Wonderful. Mr. Co-Chair, you do have quorum of the board.
Okay, thank you, Amy, and thanks for doing that on the fly. So again, welcome to all of you. Thank you for being on here this morning to a special meeting of the Wyoming Business Council. We do, of course, take seriously whether or not we call a special meeting, but occasionally there's time-sensitive things that come up, and we have a couple of those things today for the board's consideration. And as a reminder, in a special meeting, the only discussion will be related to those items that are on the agenda. So with that, we will go ahead and get started with our Services Committee and Committee Chair, Ms. Thayer. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Today we have quite a few things to present to the board on some CPF projects, Lighthouse, Lightbox, and some CTC agreements. So I am going to, at this time, turn it over to our Service Director, Brandon Marshall.
And Ms. Committee Chair, we are getting Brandon added right now into the panelist room. Okay. He should be coming in any minute here.
Okay. And Amy, are we going to also have our new broadband manager on that Brandon's going to?
Brandon can speak to that. Yes.
Great.
Hello, all. Thank you, Madam Committee Chair and the rest of the board for joining us today. We do truly appreciate you taking time out of your day to do a special meeting for us. We do have some urgent needs for your action, so look forward to presenting those to you today. First off, as you mentioned, Chad Bowling has started work with us as our broadband manager. We're extraordinarily excited to have him on. Unfortunately, he had some pre-planned travel when we hired him, and he is currently not with us. Well, he's still with us. He is just currently not on the meeting because he's unavailable, but we look forward to getting you all properly introduced in our September meeting coming up. And potentially even before that in separate meetings if you'd like. So yeah, like I said, very excited to have him on. I think you'll be very impressed with his demeanor and his ability to really put things concisely. He has a customer service background with a very, very large fiber provider, working with enormous clients like the S&P 500, for example, keeping their networks going. So great resume, and then also a great learner. He's currently in the process of putting together a presentation that we're having him give next week to a conference in Denver on all of our broadband efforts in the last couple of years. So very excited anyway to have him on. So with that, if I can share my screen. Actually, it's not wildly vital that I share my screen. I'll go without, Amy. I think that's probably a pain in the rear end.
I bet our friend Ben Peterson can make that happen. We'll just have to stop sharing ours. But Brandon, go ahead though too, whatever's easiest.
Yeah. So just a reminder to the board today, and hopefully to give you some relief, some acronym relief in the broadband world. Today we are only talking about the ARPA CPF program. This is the only subjects that we're going to be bringing to you. So any of the other mile-long list of acronyms that we have potentially shared with you in the past, they leave them out of your mind today. Today we are only talking about the American Rescue Plan Act CPF program. I want to run through just a very brief and generalized timeline of that program with you and where we've been to help show essentially where we're going now and what we're asking for in this meeting and why we're asking for it.
Thank you.
As you see in front of you,
Brandon, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So as you can see in front of you, we started work on the ARPA CPF program in spring of 2023. In fact, we started work on it somewhat earlier than that. But this is when we opened up the CPF program for applications from broadband providers in the state. The funding at that point was $70.5 million that was available to us that the legislature had allocated to that program. So then we took in those applications and began the evaluation process. We anticipated a smaller number than we actually received. We received around 116 applications for that program. At that time, because of the extra work required to evaluate those applications, we had brought a contract to you with CTC to add $250,000 to what our original contract was, which was only $96,500. Once that was approved, CTC, as well as David Johnson and our technical consultant, and Elena Zimbel, our former broadband manager, went to work evaluating those projects and putting together the system to evaluate them. After that, in December of 2023, we had come to the board with a list of projects for your approval that totaled almost exactly $70.5 million, but as you'll see there, it was $70,499,000 some odd dollars. Those were all approved. Going into May of 2024, one of the providers that had projects funded in that program had requested us to request a view to remove the funding from 3 of the projects that they had proposed. You approved that removal of the funding. At that point then, of course, we had funding left in that program. Because of that, CTC and the broadband office then took on the effort to evaluate the next set of applications in our original list of 116 that had not originally been funded. It is important to note in this, that was an extra effort on top of the contract that we had with CTC and our technical consultant, David, and there was no additional cost to that further evaluation of the applications. So that's going to bring us very quickly to today, where we're going to ask you for approval for 2 different broadband projects to replace part of the funding that was rescinded in the May board meeting. It's important to note we probably is the correct word. We likely will bring additional projects to you at the September board meeting to completely fill out that $70.5 million. Those simply weren't ready for this meeting, so we did not bring those to you. Then the final piece of CPF action that we'll be asking you for today is the monitoring, reporting, and compliance contract that we would like to enter into with CTC, who is, again, our primary, has been our primary contractor on all things broadband through the last couple of years. We are recommending a contract with them to perform the basic duties of monitoring, reporting, and compliance through the life of the CPF program, which will be June 30th of 2027. So with that overview, I'm going to toss the meeting to Josh really quick, and then I'll come back to you and we can talk about the actual contracts that we're asking you for.
Thank you, Brandon, and Madam Co-Chair, if I might, or Committee Chair, if I might take just a moment to publicly acknowledge a couple of items. One, I think, as Mr. Marshall mentioned, CTC has been a fantastic consultant for us to be able to utilize these funds, and has done a great job along with David Johnson. And we're looking forward to our new broadband manager getting up to speed as well. And those consultants will do a great job of keeping him in the loop and keeping him abreast of what's been going on so that we can execute these programs. I think it's important to note that last bullet that Brandon mentioned, which is the monitoring, reporting, and compliance. Obviously, utilizing these funds is incredibly important to the state of Wyoming and our broadband office and the connectivity across the state. But we also know that with federal funds, you've got to make sure that you can do the monitoring, reporting, and compliance for those federal funds so that the state is not on the hook for them later. And I think that's an incredibly important thing. I'm glad that the board is looking at that today. Along those lines, I'd also like to mention that and publicly acknowledge that we received a letter from the Wyoming Telecommunications Association, or WYTA, in May of this year, May 31st, I believe, after our May board meeting. That letter expressed some concerns about the pricing of one of our technical consultants. However, no action is necessary from our board or the broadband office. And further, the agreements with this consultant have been reviewed and approved by our board in public meetings. And we've worked to make all of this completely transparent and will continue to do so in the future. The board has been notified of this letter and has seen a copy of this letter from back in May. And I just wanted to acknowledge that publicly and let everyone know that we have received that letter, but no action is necessary. And we have taken it into consideration as we consider contracts and our consultant work moving into the future. I think it's also important to note that our broadband office is one person. There is one person on our team that handles that. Previously, it was Elena Zimpel, and now moving forward will be Chad Bowling. And so the role of consultants in this, so that we can deal with the myriad of requirements and quite frankly, the technical abilities that are happening in broadband at a federal level as well as at a state level is really important. And so that team is critical to us. Again, just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that we're publicly acknowledging it, and we thank them for their concerns. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Durrell. I want to echo his comments and also Mr. Marshall's team. As he said, we have a one-person board, one-person group doing this, and the demand far exceeded our availability. And so there was, that was something I also would like to note, Mr. Durrell, that, the demand for these CPF funds far exceeded what we had expected and the availability. So thank you. Let's go ahead, Mr. Marshall, and go to the contracts that are on the agenda.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Thayer. Board, for your consideration today, and also just so you know, we do have David Johnson, our technical consultant, online that's available to answer any questions or add any details he thinks necessary into these project considerations. The two projects before you today, as you can still see on your screen, are one with Visionary Communications. The project is titled Cheyenne Ranchettes. If you're familiar, that's portions of North Cheyenne. They're offering to serve 330 locations. Currently, those locations, 247 of those are unserved and 83 of them are underserved. With that is $1,253,837.61, again, coming from the ARPA CPF fund. The second project we're proposing for you to fund today is with Mountain West Technologies. This project is in Northwest Casper, serving 98 locations. 97 of the locations are serving in this project are currently completely unserved, with one underserved location in this project. These services will be primarily commercial and industrial. So good advantages there on that. That project is $932,761.59. Madam Chairman, we had at the previous meeting considered the projects as a bulk request. I believe that's what we're doing now with these requests. So with that, I will hand the microphone, even though we don't have one, to David Johnson, if he has anything to add, or if any of you have questions, we can go from there.
Thank you, Brandon. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Committee Chair, members of the board. Certainly appreciate the opportunity today to bring these projects forward. Just to add a little bit to the history, as Brandon had mentioned, we had originally awarded 32 projects in the December board meeting. As Brandon stated, 3 of those projects were turned back. One of them was modified, and you had approved that at the last board meeting. These 2 projects being brought forward are, again, 2 excellent projects to serve the citizens of Wyoming in those locations, both from a fiber growth perspective out into the close-in rural areas of these communities. But as Brandon mentioned, the Casper project is significant because not only from a residential perspective of the citizens that live in that area, but also from the advantages to the businesses in that area as well. So with that, Madam Committee Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
So any questions from the board on these two contracts that are presented to us?
Madam
Mr. Lance.
Co-Chair, quick question, since I'm new, in terms of the two projects, it lists specific locations. Are the locations within a broad area that can be expanded, or are these connections only for the 330 and the 98 locations? And for purposes of conflict, I'm assuming that the Visionary Communications contract doesn't extend into the point, even though it would be a small conflict. I just want to make sure that we wouldn't benefit from that personally, or I wouldn't.
Great question. Brandon or Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, Madam Committee Chair, Mr. Lance, excellent question. And with all of these projects that we have awarded, it is certainly an expansion of networks to put fiber optics further out into the communities or counties in this case, Mr. Lance. So in this case, it will give Visionary or other providers the opportunity to grow their networks even beyond the areas that are stated within the project. So as we continue to build out fiber optics further out into the areas, it just creates additional advantages for those networks to be expanded. And to answer your question specifically about the neighborhood, Mr. Lance, those 330 locations do not include anything in the Point subdivision in Cheyenne.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for either of these gentlemen? Amy, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Anything else, Brandon, before I call for the motion?
No, I think we're great. Thank you.
Okay, I call for the motion to approve both of these contracts.
So moved.
And a first from
Seconded.
Derek, and a second from,
I seconded.
sorry, Kathy, and a
Kathy.
second from Kathy. Any discussion? Having heard none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, Brandon, the next action item we have for the Services Committee is the contract for CTC, monitoring, reporting, and compliance. Anything else you've already explained that, but I'll give you the floor back if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah, we don't have to deliberate. We're happy to take questions. We also have Joanne Hovis with CTC on the line with us too, if there are any questions. Just very quickly, if you have reference into your board book, the scope of work for this contract is in there and describes the basic tasks of these. The very high overview of what CTC will be offering for us over the next 3 years in this service is design of the systems that will allow us to make sure that the programs that the funding we have put through the CPF program meets all of the federal guidelines. They're going to help us develop these systems for reporting as well as the standards for that. Then moving into the different tasks of this, ultimately what they'll be assisting us with is for preparation of the reports that we're required to submit to the federal government at regular intervals, as well as the actual physical compliance, which I think is something that sticks out in my mind is very important on this, is as these projects are in the dirt, we'll need assistance and we'll need some systems to be able to make sure that what we're paying for is what's going in the dirt. We don't anticipate any issue with that, but it's a requirement of these federal programs that we be very, very diligent in making sure that that funding is spent the way that the program intended. So that is essentially what they'll be offering us for the next 3 years at this fixed price of $900,000. With that, Joanne, if you're available and would like to add anything to that, I would be happy to have you do that. Otherwise, same as before, board, if you have questions, we're also happy to take those.
Thank you. I think that was a perfect summary. I don't think I would add anything. in very brief summary, this is about all of the services necessary and required by the federal government so that the funds are not questioned or taken back because of non-compliance and reporting. And as we know, there's no lack of paperwork with regard to federal government oversight. And then it's also designed to just make sure that the state of Wyoming gets what it is paying for, and that these networks are built the way promised, and that you get the many decades of value from building them right, delivering them right, and that before you make any payment, you have confidence that that has taken place.
Thank you, Joanne. So any questions from the board? Again, reminding everybody this is a requirement. If anybody's ever dealt with federal compliance and reporting, this is nice, you know, to have this contract in place. Any questions from the board?
Pam, I raised my hand, but I don't see it on there, but
See it. Go
I
ahead,
do
Kathy.
have am I on there? Thank you. I do have a question. How is the reporting going to be done to Joanne's committee? Do they approach them? Does Joanne's team approach them? Are the people that are doing the work required to give reports every so often? How is that going to work?
If I may, Madam Chair, thank you.
Yes.
It's an excellent question. That is some of the structure and the design that will be put in place, but effectively, all of the awardees who accept funds from the Wyoming Broadband Office as part of your grant programs agree that they will report, they will provide technical data, they will work with the office on verification, and they will provide much of the underlying data that is necessary. So they have reporting obligations to the Wyoming Broadband Office, and the Wyoming Broadband Office has reporting obligations to the federal government, in this case, the Department of the Treasury. What we will do is, as your team working for the new broadband manager and the broadband office, we will work with those awardees. We will receive the data from them. We'll set up all of the processes and the channels for receiving the data. We will vet it and review it, ask them to correct, add, supplement, etc. We'll go out and we'll do field reviews and tests. We will analyze whether we think there are risk factors and so on. And then we'll build packages for the broadband office so that the broadband office has at its disposal the data and recommendations to be able to make decisions, and then we will facilitate and undertake on your behalf all of the reporting to the federal government. I hope that answers the question. It's a lot of different pieces, but it's a lot of back and forth with your awardees.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. It does answer the question, and I just have a little follow-up. And these companies understand there are consequences if they do not do the reporting, and there's a timeline for that, am I correct? And if they don't do it, does the money get taken away? What is the consequence?
Great question.
So I can't speak from a legal standpoint, just a general framework. What I would share is that they take these obligations on as binding obligations of accepting the funds, and the structure that has been put in place for paying them the funds is all contingent on their compliance. So if at some point they stop performing, and reporting is part of their performance as much as designing and building a network is part of their performance, if they stop, we start seeing red flags. We raise those, we do risk assessments, we do site visits and assessments, and we advise against paying them. And they get paid on a reimbursement basis. So that is an additional form of protection built in for the state, that you are not paying on a speculative basis, but only based on demonstrated performance.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Oops, Dave, go ahead.
Sorry, Madam Co-Chair, Ms. Tomasi, I would just add to that. There are some clawback provisions in the contracts that were executed with these awards as well that offer the state some protections along those lines as well, as Joanne said. So thank you.
Any other questions from the board at this time? Okay, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the contract with CTC for ARPA capital project funds, monitoring, reporting, and compliance. May I have a first?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Madam Co-Chair, do we need the dollar amount in the motion?
Amy, do we need the amount in the motion?
Yeah, Madam Committee Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, members of the board, Mr. Brown, because you're making the motion on the contract, the dollar amount is in the contract.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification or ask, Chuck. Okay, having no other discussion or questions, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next item is the contract with Lightbox. Brandon.
All right, thank you so very much, Madam Committee Chair. Our final request of the board today will be for contract continuation. Well, a new contract, but continuation of relationship with Lightbox Parent LP. The contract with them is in your board materials, as you've seen. We've had, we would describe as a very effective relationship with Lightbox over the last couple of years, providing our public-facing broadband map capabilities, as well as assistance in our ability to compare the Wyoming maps to the federal maps that the FCC is publishing. Going forward, this mapping will be vital to our ability to administer the BEAD program. I'm sorry, I said I wasn't going to talk about that, but it is actually correct. This is the big need going forward. So that would be what we are asking for today, again, is continuing of the relationship we've currently got with Lightbox. There is a notable difference in this contract versus the ones that we have had in the past. We are now going to be able to access the fabric data for the broadband mapping system and allow access to up to 10 different agencies of the state of Wyoming to this data. At this point in time, our discussions are with ETS as well as YGISC at the University of Wyoming. Other possible organizations that could find good value in this data are, of course, WYDOT, Department of Health, Department of Education, community colleges. Any of these organizations that would find broadband data useful would then be able to access data through us. We would enter into separate agreements with each of those entities, called an interagency agreement, similar to a contract to access that data. But that's a significant difference in this contract that we're asking you to approve versus any of the others, but it is also the only difference. With that, as we've done on the other actions, we do have a representative of Lightbox on the phone or on the meeting today with us, available for questions that you may have either on the contract or just in general our relationship with them. And then I believe David Johnson may also want to add light to any of this. If he does not, I'm fine with passing it off to Steve, I believe, who is here with Lightbox, if you have any questions or if you'd like to add anything.
Great. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, everyone. David, I wasn't sure if you wanted to provide any background or context, but if not, I'm happy to jump in as well.
Yeah, Steve, I'll leave that up to you. Thank you.
Okay, well, first, I just wanted to, you know, our relationship with the state of Wyoming began in August of 2022. It's been a wonderful relationship, and just wanted to thank everyone for partnership to date. Lightbox brings big data capabilities. We brought program managers, data engineers, and application engineers to the program. We've got deep experience in mapping platforms and creating mapping experiences, and we're very experienced in big data. So As an example, determining serviceability on a location basis for the state of Wyoming has been a core competency and something that we've been proud to do for the state of Wyoming since late August. I guess with that, I'll just be available for any questions or additional comments from David.
Yeah, just quickly, certainly appreciate the relationship that we have had with Lightbox. As Brandon mentioned, it is critical to our BEAD application process that we'll be launching in fourth quarter, that we continue to utilize their mapping platform to assist in that. But also, I think most importantly, giving the public the view of the availability of broadband in their areas, and also where the project awards have been, to demonstrate the effectiveness of the programs that we're operating under the Wyoming Business Council Broadband Office. So with that, Madam Committee Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Steve and Dave. Any questions from the board on this continuation or the new one-year contract with Lightbox? Okay, I think I do have one thing that really excites me when we were in our meeting last week is this opportunity to have other agencies in the state use this data. I think that's so important. I think a good example is during COVID in 2020, the Department of Education, or I'm going to go local, is Carbon One, was trying to figure out how we get access and data. And I mean, this information would have been so much easier to find out with our area in our school district. So I'm excited about this new opportunity. So thank you. Any other? Okay, so I call for a motion to approve this contract.
Madam Chair, I move approval.
This is Kathy Pam, so moved.
So did you guys get that? Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed. Motion carries. I think, Brandon, that is it for the Services Committee.
We've done it, and 23 minutes early to boot. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you all, for everybody who was on the call. Mr. Co-Chair, I turn it back over to you, Eric.
Okay, thank you, Madam Committee Chair. And again, thanks to those who presented and the services team and committee. Good work there. So next up, we have the Strategy Committee, and for that, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Ahrens. Strategy Committee just has one contract to bring forth today for graphic design and content creation support with Warehouse 21. So with that, I'll hand off to Ms. Fitzgerald and Ms. Quick to delve into this a little bit further for us. Ms. Grenfell, or either one of them on as panelists yet?
Yes, we've got both Ms. Quick and Ms. Fitzgerald in as panelists.
Fantastic. Then I will let them take over from here.
Thank you, Mr. Committee Chair and Mr. Co-Chair. I will actually just turn it right on over to Ms. Quick, our Strategic Communications Lead.
Thank you, Sarah, and Committee Chair Smith, and all board members. Thank you for taking some time and adding this to the special board meeting agenda today. We do feel that it's pretty time sensitive. We have seen the need, identified a problem that we don't have an internal graphic design support. So we went out of house to look for that. And we did, if you'll remember, put out an RFP earlier in the year. We were fortunate to get a lot of great submissions, including several Wyoming ones. We then conducted some oral interviews with those candidates, the finalists, and selected Warehouse 21 to help us with that graphic design need. They were selected not only for their high quality of professionalism, their products that they have produced, but also the relationship that we've had with them and the ease of continuing that going forward to meet the needs. We do have some considerable needs, and that we did a survey. We've worked with many of our teams and individuals about different needs that they have. So we put together a pretty extensive list, and that's outlined kind of in more generic terms in the contract. But this will be services that the entire team can access. I will be the project manager for that, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the contract and that relationship with Warehouse 21.
Any questions from the board? I'm not seeing any hands raised, but just want to double check. Fantastic. So seeing none, would entertain a motion to approve the contract.
So moved.
I have a motion for Mr. Law. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'm going to go with a second from Ms. Thayer. Any further discussion? Fantastic. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Great. Here's motion carries. And with that, I will hand the meeting back over to you, Co-Chair Ahrens. Thank you all for your votes and support.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith, and to the strategy team. Cruising along here. Next up, Investment Committee, Mr. Law.
Thank you, Mr. Ahrens. We have a couple contracts as well, like the rest, and to go into some more detail in addition to your the things on your agenda, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Wendling to explain those.
Thank you, Mr. Law. You hear me okay?
Loud and clear, John.
Awesome. Mr. Committee Chair, thank you, members of the board. Good morning. The first item for your consideration is amendment for Marquee Escrow's contract. This amendment is due to negotiations that are being finalized for the ownership transfer of Marquee Escrow Services. They're our loan servicing agent to Bighorn Federal Savings Bank. The amendment will include a new subsection with conflict of interest language added in the general provisions section. The amendment language before you is just a draft and may be slightly refined upon legal review. The amendment is just a preemptive measure to facilitate and strengthen the private sector transaction. It will not change the terms of service currently provided, and with the board's approval today will allow us to be prepared to move at the speed of business, not delaying the transaction once negotiations are finalized. Marquee will maintain its name, current staff, and the Cheyenne location for the immediate future, and we look forward to working through the transition and continue receiving the high-quality loan services we've had from Marquee for over a decade. Staff is available for any questions regarding this amendment and appreciate your consideration on the inclusion of the conflict of interest language. Available for any questions.
Doesn't look like there's any, John. It's just basically that company is becoming owned by another entity, and so this is just the appropriate mechanism to recognize that, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it's just we're just getting ready for it. So they are in negotiation. We've known that this has been something they've been trying to do, the current owners, and get that ownership transferred. They're looking to retire. So yeah, we've known it's been in place. Now we know there's who's involved. So yeah, it's kind of a additional measure we're taking. Nothing we have to do, but just would like to help facilitate it.
Good to be in front of it. If there are no questions, I would entertain a motion to accept the staff's recommendation to get that contract switched.
So moved.
It's been moved by Derek. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Thayer. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, John, and you can move on to the next one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Committee Chair, members of the board. The next item for your consideration is a loan request. This one's coming from Little Horn State Bank, Sheridan, Wyoming, for the loan recipient BH Inc., doing business as Brits and Company. Little Horn State Bank has requested the WBC's participation on a 50-50 loan to provide Brits and Company long-term financing on the purchase of a piece of equipment. It's a new Trump tube laser CNC machine. The request from Little Horn State Bank is for $500,000 on a $1 million total loan, or 50% of the loan amount. The purchase price of the equipment is at a value of about $1.2 million, making the loan to value on the collateral approximately 83%. The loan terms will be for 7 years at a blended rate of 6.6%. Our portion is at 5.25%, and the bank will be at 7.95%. Brits and Company was founded in Texas in 1991 by William Brits Sr. He moved the business to Wheatland, Wyoming in '93. The company designs, develops, manufactures, installs animal housing systems, environmentally controlled enclosures, and care products for the biomedical research industry. Mr. Brits Sr. retired about 20 years ago and turned over his operations to his son, William Brits Jr., and his wife, Tamara. The company has leased the facility recently in Sheridan and relocating their operations there. They currently employ about 50 employees, according to the bank, which of around 20 of them are now in Sheridan. They plan to move all the operations to Sheridan within the next 2 years. It's currently operated independently as a Wyoming company, though it was previously sold. It sold 70% of its equity to Technoplast in October of '23. That company is a family-owned Italian company who similarly manufactures laboratory animal equipment. WBC has been working with Mr. Patrick Schilling. He's the senior vice president over at Little Horn State Bank. They're lending according to their loan policy. The borrower is submitting a down payment, and we are partnering in accordance with the guidelines outlined in our 50-50 loan program. As far as evaluations of financial credit history and the business and owners covering the debt service, there are no concerns, and those are outlined a little more specifically in the memo included in the board materials on the second to last page under cash flow. Our net available balance for the challenge loan fund is about $13.9 million, and staff is recommending approval of the 50-50 loan participation in the amount of $500,000 with Little Horn State Bank and Sheridan for recipient BH Inc., doing business as Brits and Company. And I'm happy to answer any questions and appreciate your consideration with this loan.
Any questions for John and this loan application? Well, you did a great job of explaining it then, John.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Seeing no additional questions for John, I would entertain a motion that we accept the staff recommendation for this 50-50 loan.
So moved.
It's been moved.
I'll second that.
It's been seconded. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Great. All right. Well, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Ahrens. We whipped through that pretty efficiently, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Committee Chair. And as this is a special meeting, there's no other business to come before the board today. I will check in with Josh in the event that he had something before we conclude. Mr. Durrell.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and nothing material, but just a thank you to the board and to the folks on the committees and our team of kind of moving at the speed of business. I think that this is a really important element that the Business Council needs to continue to do, and has shown in this particular case that we can go ahead and get agreements done at a speed that is much more like business rather than government. And I appreciate everyone being willing to get on and do that, and committees to meet and take care of the business at hand. And I think it's a great example. So thank you all for your participation today and careful consideration. Thanks. Mr. Co-Chair, I believe you're muted somehow. Sorry.
Oh, how about now? Huh. Okay, so yes, well said, Josh, and thank you again for all jumping on here and making sure we can keep progress going, even if it's a little off cycle. Our next regular meeting for the board will be September 10th and 11th in Laramie, and August 27th, the week of August 27th will be committee meetings. So again, thanks to all of you, and excuse me, at this point, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Got a first and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. And thanks again to all of you, and enjoy the rest of the summer. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.